Remember Abraham? God gave him 3 promises. Your children will become a great nation. That nation will have its own land, and from that nation will come a blessing for the whole world. After 1,500 years, that's 1,500 years, 2 of those promises had come true. Abraham's kids became the nation of Israel, and they got their own land, the promised land. But the blessing for the whole world? What was that? And when was it coming? Would it solve the problem of sin? Would it change the people of the world so they could be friends with God again? The prophet Isaiah talked about the Messiah, a word that means anointed one. God anointed kings and very special leaders when he had an important job for them to do. But 400 years had passed since the time of Isaiah. 400 years without any new prophets. 400 years without any new messages from God. And the Israelites were getting a little tired of waiting for this special leader. Where was the blessing? Some of the Israelites were starting to lose hope. But then something incredible happened. An angel appeared to a young woman named Mary. "You will have a son," the angel said. "How will this be?" Mary asked. "I'm not even married." You see, it's true. Mary was not married. She had promised to marry a man named Joseph, but they were not married yet. Then the angel said something amazing. He told Mary the baby's father would be God himself, and her baby would be the Son of God. Pretty wild, right? You would think that Mary would have passed out and fallen on the floor right then. But Mary was brave. She trusted God. "I am the servant of the Lord," she said. "May this happen to me just like you said." Then the angel said one more thing to Mary. He said, "The baby's name will be Jesus." When it was almost time for the baby to come, Joseph and Mary traveled to Bethlehem. Remember how they got there? They needed somewhere to stay, a nice place for Mary to have her baby. If this baby really was God's own son, he should be born in a fancy, fancy palace, right? In a big, beautiful palace, surrounded by fancy people wearing fancy clothes. After all, this baby was the Son of God. But Mary did not have her baby in a fancy palace or in a nice warm inn by the fire. Nope. Mary had her baby in a barn for animals. Mary's baby, Jesus, was not surrounded by fancy people. He was surrounded by sheep and goats and chickens. If this was God's blessing for the world, the blessing Israel had been waiting for almost 2,000 years, this was not the way people expected it to happen. Then more angels showed up, a whole bunch of them, and they sang and they celebrated the birth of the new king, the birth of Jesus. Where do you think God's mighty angels announced the birth of his son? Probably in the biggest city to the world's most important people, right? To the kings and generals? The fancy important people? No, that is not where angels sang of Jesus' birth. This amazing group of God's messengers appeared in the middle of a field, in the middle of nowhere. And they did not sing to kings and rich folks, they sang to shepherds, a group of dirty, smelly guys who took care of dirty, smelly sheep. God showed the world his power, who he really was, not in an army, but in a baby. Not in a palace, but in a stable. Not to kings and rich people, but to shepherds. God's rescue plan was happening. His kingdom was on the move. But God was announcing very clearly that this blessing for the world was not going to be what people expected. This tiny baby born in a stable, celebrated by shepherds, was going to turn the whole world upside